Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we got to talk about what is going on in the Democratic Party, in the mainstream media, because since Kamala Harris's absolute annihilation on Election Day, since she was wiped off the board by the evil orange man, since he ran the table in 7 out of all 7 swing states, they've gotten desperate, they've gotten panicky, and they've decided that their solution to their candidate who stole the nomination without earning it, didn't get a single vote in the Democratic primary, losing the election on the general level, should be that she gets to be president anyway through this cockamamie scheme that's drummed up by internet idiots, and they decide to present it as if it should actually happen. And in addition to that, they also want her on the Supreme Court, despite the fact that she was never a judge, although to be clear, that's actually happened before, but they want to knock off Sonia Sotomayor, the only Latina on the Supreme Court, in order to do so. Now, we're going to get into this, we're going to talk about this, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
We're now 71 days from Trump taking the oath of office. What is the most important thing that everybody is looking for? That is my question. I'll start with you.
So the setup to this question is actually related to the transition and what Joe Biden is going to do as a lame duck president in his final 71 days in office. This is presented to the broader CNN panel. However, our buddy Jamal decided that he is going to go off and pitch this insane idea that Kamala Harris should become the 47th president anyway, for a number of reasons that honestly, if you think are necessary for American politics, then she should have never been your candidate in the first place. Let me explain after I show you the clip.
Joe Biden's been a phenomenal president. He's lived up to so many of the promises he's made. There's one promise left that he could fulfill, being a transitional figure. He could resign the presidency in the next 30 days, make Kamala Harris the president of the United States.
Whoa.
It would absolve her from being able to, from having to oversee the January 6th transition, right, of her own defeat. And it would make sure that it would dominate the news at a point where Democrats have to learn drama and transparency and doing things that the public want to see is the time. This is the moment for us to change the entire perspective of how Democrats operate.
So I just want to say a couple of things. One, this is delusional, magical thinking on a grand scale. This is insane in every possible way. And the fact that he concludes this by saying, hey, you know what? Democrats have to embrace the drama. They have to embrace all this stuff in the public, and they have to do what people want to see. But the facts are what they are. Unlike the Hillary Clinton election, where Hillary Clinton at least won the popular vote versus Donald Trump, Kamala Harris lost overwhelmingly, not only in the Electoral College, but in the popular vote as well.
Democrats have to learn drama and transparency and doing things that the public want to see is the time. This is the moment for us to change the entire perspective.
So let's be clear, the people do not want to see Kamala Harris as president, and the reason why I know they don't want to see her as president is because they had an election, it happened a week ago, and guess what? She lost overwhelmingly in a way that a Democrat has not lost since 2004. Again, that's the last time a Republican won the Electoral College and the popular vote in the same election. Kamala Harris takes that L, she takes that defeat, but this guy thinks she should be president anyway. And again, I know I'm working backwards through what he said, but one of the other reasons why apparently he should do this is to spare Kamala Harris of the indignity of doing one of her jobs as vice president. You know, the job that she currently holds, the one that she also didn't earn, the one that Biden didn't even want her on board for, but it was essentially forced to pick her due to the Black Lives Matter riots. Well, guess what? Certifying the election on January 6th is one of the few duties of the vice president, and Kamala Harris apparently needs to be spared that indignity of certifying the election.
Whoa. It would absolve her from being able to, from having to oversee the January 6th transition, right, of her own defeat.
So look, Jamal Simmons thinks that he's making a good point right here. He thinks that he's outlining his case for why Joe Biden should do this, but in reality, he is expressing all of the points that show us why Kamala Harris should have never been the Democratic nominee, should have never been president of the United States. This actually affirms the vote of Election Day 1 week prior, and the reason why is because he doesn't even believe that she's strong enough to do the limited duties of the vice president. He thinks that this will be what people want to see, despite the fact that people showed us that they definitely don't want to see this, and in addition to that, he's saying, oh, well, guess what? this will end up making it easier for other women to run if we just hand her a discount version of the presidency for about 30 days that everybody will understand, despite the fact that she'll go down in the history books as a president, is not legitimate in any possible way. This would be chaotic. This would be nonsensical. And this is about as dumb. In fact, it's actually significantly dumber than the idea of putting Kamala Harris on the Supreme Court, which, by the way, I don't know if you guys are aware of this. They were actually pushing for this to happen with Hillary Clinton after she lost, so we're seeing the same exact loser playbook on repeat, except this one has the added wrinkle of Joe Biden resigning from the presidency, allowing Kamala Harris to steal something else from him in order to make her president.
Now jumped from an internet meme to a Sunday morning show.
Jamal's out here right now.
Congratulations.
Season of House of Cards.
I thought you were going to say, what about the Supreme Court? That's also out there.
Well, the Supreme Court might happen. I don't know if it will, but I think this is something that's in Joe Biden's control. And if he did it, it would fulfill his last promise. It would give Kamala Harris the chance to be the 47th president of the United States of America. It would disrupt all of Donald Trump's paraphernalia. Right? You have to rebrand everything. But and it would make it easier for the next woman who runs for president to not have to worry about all the historical, weight of being the first.
Yeah, that is pure unfiltered weakness, although I do give credit, this would disrupt the Trump 45-47 merchandise, so that is a little bit of a humorous anecdote right there. So, I'll be a little bit merciful right here, but for those of you who are unaware, the thing that they mentioned about the Supreme Court, the other internet meme, is this idea that Sonia Sotomayor, who by the way claims that she's in good health but apparently has diabetes, should step down from the court in order to let Biden appoint somebody, and for some reason people want Kamala Harris to be appointed, so they could lock up that seat in case she dies in the next 4 years and Trump gets a potential third in his second term Supreme Court seat, because people are expecting Clarence Thomas to step down. People are expecting Justice Alito to step down. And if you also have the death of Sotomayor, then Trump will essentially have picked 6 of the 9 Supreme Court justices, locking it up at a 7-2 majority for decades to come. That being said, I find this to be rather ridiculous. And on top of that, it takes a minute for you to get what you need to get together in order to get a judge on the Supreme Court. So there's a chance that they do this, they try the appointment, it ends up getting locked up in the Senate, and they inadvertently give Trump Sotomayor's seat when they were intending to do the opposite. In addition to that, it is funny that immediately they're trying to throw the Latinos under the bus by removing the first and only Latino Supreme Court justice, if you care about that sort of thing.
It would make it easier for the next woman who runs for president to not have to worry about all the historical, weight of being the first.
But from the party that pushes feminism all the time, from the party that says women are just as strong and just as capable as men all the time, for them to make the case that Kamala Harris needs to be cheated into this position as president for 30 days in this obviously fake and ridiculous way that nobody will see as legitimate after she loses the election, again, wiped out in every swing state, wiped out in the popular vote, for other women to know that they can be president is absurd, because you're essentially saying that the old white man, Joseph R. Biden, needs to hand her this opportunity because she can't earn it on her own. You're basically admitting that Dementia Joe is more capable of earning the White House than any woman in the country, because again, the implication is Kamala Harris getting cheated into this position will make it possible for women to win this position in a legitimate way in the future. That is damning. That is absurd. That is ridiculous. And honestly, it's one of the more offensive things that you could say to American women, because you're basically saying they need to be cheated into this position like Kamala Harris was. Now look, the panel ends up moving on to more realistic proposals, but I also want to conclude with what we've learned from Joe Biden post this election, now that the Democrats are all fighting one another. And that is something that I told you and learned from the campaign book, Lucky How Joe Biden Barely Won the Presidency, which is as follows. This man doesn't like Kamala Harris. This man can't stand Kamala Harris. In fact, he never wanted to pick her as the VP in the first place, but he was forced into it by the Black Lives Matter riots because he promised to have a woman on the VP. If you'll recall, he promised a black woman on the Supreme Court, but a woman as the VP ticket. However, after the BLM riots, they said you had to pick a black woman, and Kamala Harris, even though again, people are going to say she's mostly Indian, was the highest ranking black Democrat in government. Even though that was the case and he had to pick her, if you read that book, what you'll find out is that he circled his options 3 or 4 times because he just wanted to avoid having Harris on the ticket. We find out that he intentionally gave her jobs that he thought would do her damage politically, and he had people implanted on her team that were leaking all this information about how incompetent and how idiotic she was for 3+ years. In fact, that 90% staff turnover rate that you hear about from Kamala Harris, that is in part because they were working against her on behalf of the Biden team because they couldn't stand this woman.
What is the relationship? What has been the relationship throughout the campaign, and what do you think the relationship is today between Biden world and Kamala Harris world?
Well, I have friends, in both worlds, and let me tell you, the relationship was terrible even before the campaign. There was backstabbing. They wanted to hand her the most, least favorable agenda, the legislative priorities. She was stuck with immigration, civil rights, like none of that went
before she was even a candidate,
exactly.
You're saying, as vice president.
There was a lot of backstabbing we saw in the press. People were leaking stuff all the time. The White House leaking like a sieve when it came to Kamala Harris. And finally, in the final year, she was able to stabilize and stop the bleeding of her staff because there was a lot of turnover as well. And we saw the press reports about that. And things have finally started to calm down. And I actually think President Biden, the whole endorsing her 30 minutes after he dropped out, I think that was a big FU to the party. You don't want me, here's somebody that you may not like. But deal with it,
Suggesting that he's sticking the party with Kamala
Kind of like
Harris.
sticking it to the man.
In addition to that, and again, this is just speculation, apparently Joe Biden endorsed Kamala Harris 30 minutes after he dropped out as revenge against Barack Obama, against Nancy Pelosi, against the Democratic Party elites who forced him off the ticket via a coup because he wanted them to suffer the consequences of having a significantly worse candidate. So he ended up doing that. So all these other Democrats that pretend to love Kamala rallied behind her to not show party division because Biden dropped one final FU on the Democratic Party. And by the way, you see Joe Biden in all these different press conferences and interviews smiling at the media. He's happier than honestly when he won the presidency back in 2020. He is happier than when he was sworn in as the president of the United States in 2021 because he got to stick it to the Democratic Party because once again, Barack Obama forced him off the ticket, forced him not to run, and that ultimately ended up leading to a defeat for the Democrats. So in Biden's mind, he's undefeated, which is true, by the way. He's never lost a general election, and all these other Obama picks are a disaster. Obama picked Hillary in 2016, told them that he was going to throw all his support behind Hillary, and Biden was essentially pushed out of the race then. Hillary loses. Biden comes back in 2020. Obama's behind Elizabeth Warren. He's fundraising for Elizabeth Warren. Biden beats the snot out of her and Bernie Sanders and Michael Bloomberg, by the way, who was stealing his staff and outspending him and getting other Democratic donors to starve him out, and wins the presidency. Then they remove him, put in Kamala Harris, or we're going to put in somebody else, but Biden says, you know what? Bring in Kamala Harris, and that ultimately ends up leading to a disaster electorally, and Biden is smiling ear to ear about it. In fact, his press conference post Kamala Harris's loss, suddenly he was coherent. Suddenly there was no signs of dementia, but there was signs of joy that the Kamala Harris campaign had been pushing all along, but that joy was in Joe Biden's heart, in his spirit. So yeah, absolutely not is Joe Biden going to resign and give her this position. He obviously wanted to be president his whole life. He wanted to be a 2-term president. They ripped that away from him, and he is seeking revenge on the Democrats for that, and he's basically going to go out, do a mic drop, and that's it. He's going to be like, peace, invite Donald Trump over for lunch, tell him you're welcome, I'm on Team MAGA now, and that's really all I have for you guys about this particular story. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about this insane Kamala theory or plan. Till next time.